I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons, my wildlings, knights watching Kingsguard. My Kingsguard include Brendan, Nick, Oscar, Stuart, Josephine, Ikaika, Amanda, RJ, Shad, Nicoletta, Ezra, Jennifer, Jeffrey, Sarah, Pat, and Kevin. Thank you all so much. You're the best. Welcome back to the Fantasy Network, everyone. My name is, of course, Jimmy Nets, and today we are going to be reviewing, well, more so giving my reactions and my thoughts about the first arc in a manga called, I'm sure you've heard of it, Berserk by Kentaro Miura, who did pass away recently, and I know that was a huge blow to the manga community, really the storytelling community, because what he was able to do with Berserk, and he has some other works too, but definitely Berserk has become one of the most beloved fandoms that I've seen online, and I've had it recommended to me multiple times. Numerous amounts of people saying, hey, you like A Song of Ice and Fire, you like First Law, you should really give Berserk a try. Manga's never really been my medium for storytelling, but I did want to kind of dip my toes, because at the end of the day, it's storytelling, and that's what I'm here for. I love good stories. And the two that I had recommended to me the most were Vinland Saga, which I will be covering, and Berserk. So I decided to pick up this ridiculously nice, by the way, deluxe edition. It contains the whole first arc of the Black Swordsman, and I thought this would give me my first real taste of Berserk, and really manga as well. And I'm here today to tell you that I really enjoyed it, to be honest with you. So the way this is going to work, I'm just going to kind of give my thoughts about everything that happened here in this first deluxe edition. It has a little bit of a sliver of the second arc, the Golden Age, but I'm basically only going to be talking about the Black Swordsman arc in this video. If you have not read Berserk, I am going to be talking spoilers here, so you may want to click off the video. Though, if you're not sold on Berserk, maybe hearing me talk about specific things might get you interested, so maybe you want to hang around. It's really up to you, but I will be talking about specific events and characters that did happen in this. With all that said, and all that out of the way, let's talk about Berserk. Berserk opens up in a very WTF way. Like, the first few panels I see are, we have Guts, which is an amazing name, by the way. And I have an affinity for just the big sword thing. I love all that. But it opens up, and he's on top of what seems to be a normal woman, but then the next panel turns into a monster. So I'm like, oh, okay, so this is going to be outlandish. Like, this is going to be as ridiculous and graphic as everyone told me it would be. Immediately from that, and then going on into, where he kind of fights the Snake Lord, it's giving me Witcher vibes in some ways, and that's a good thing, by the way. And then also, on the other hand, it kind of gives me a little bit of a Dark Souls or Souls game type feel. The big sword, the big monsters, it's creepy, it's dark, it's grim. And in the last 2 years, really, the Souls games have become my favorite games, really. So immediately, I'm digging the vibes, even though it is super duper graphic. So he kills this like succubus type monster that he was just on top of, and that was wild. One thing I just want to get out of the way, I'm not going to critique anything with illustrations, because one, I just have immense respect for anyone that can make a legible, like, visual presentation of art. I think it's really impressive, and I'm just not the person to do that. So I'll talk about things I really like, but I'm not going to have any critiques about how good the illustrations were or anything. I've heard they get better as they go, and that's cool, but I enjoyed all of the visual storytelling I got from this, and I think that's one of the things, not just about Berserk, but manga in general, that I kind of undervalued, was how amazing it is to actually be able to see what's happening in the story as you're reading it. Because when I read my books, as you can tell from all the book reviews on the channel, I'm not a very visual reader, unfortunately. I have a lot of trouble visualizing things. So getting into a visual storytelling medium like manga is really excellent, and I really like it, and it just feels fun. So after slaying like the succubus type monster, whatever, he goes to a town of Koka, which was interesting. He beats up some thugs. He's already getting in trouble. You can tell this is a no-nonsense guy, and he's on a mission of some sort. I didn't know what it was at this time, but he ends up getting thrown in jail, right? And then this is the part where I really get into the story, because he finds an elf, which kind of is like a little, if for Stormlight fans, like a spren almost, like a little fairy following him around, and he names her Bug, which it's like Guts and Bug, Bugs and Gut. It's just such a good duo name, and I love how simple everything is named here, because the action and the visual storytelling like do the rest, right? So it keeps it simple while still being like not just a 2D kind of story, and I like that a lot. Naming things is a very important skill, and I think that Berserk has really good names, so far at least. So the elf Bug helps free him from jail, and she heals him, and she's like very cheery and very thankful to be with him. Like, she's just happy to be along for the ride. Guts is having none of this. I mean, Guts is a very unlikable person. Like, out of the get-go, you're just like, okay, he's doing cool things by, like, slaying these big monsters, but he's not exactly lovable by any means, which tells you it's going to be a very morally gray type of story, which I'm into. But the Snake Lord comes into town, he's burning everything down, and Guts isn't having any of it. Guts is like, okay, I'm gonna lay waste to you here, right in the middle of town. And it's not even so much I think he's like trying to save people. It's clearly that the Snake Lord has some sort of attachment to his larger goal, and I don't know what that is at this point when I'm reading it, right? But I'm catching on to these things. And at the end of the battle, which was awesome, by the way, I really enjoyed all of those panels. He questions about the God Hand. So now I'm putting that in the back of my mind. And I say, okay, there's a little bit more than this. It's not just like go to this town, pick up this contract, clear this episodic type thing. Like, there's clearly bigger things at play here, and this is the first mention of the God Hand, so I like that. I like the fact that now I have something to look forward to. So fast forward a little bit, we're going into a new place, and it's being ruled by a guy called the Count, who I believe the first thing that comes up in the story is they're executing these people who are like heretics. And I just remember the panel, and the Count's like this big dude. He's kind of gross looking, and he grabs this person's head who has a mark on them, and he like crunches their skull open. It is so horrifying. It's borderline horror, right? It's just very grotesque, but that panel has stuck with me even as I've moved on to the other stuff and I've read other stuff. Like, I keep thinking about that panel of like the eyeballs popping out. It's really gruesome stuff. But the Count is obviously a big baddie. And while we got to where the Count is with all of his apostles, and I think there was a guy named Xandark, maybe it was I think it was Xandark, that Guts actually ends up disfiguring. During all this time, we get a lot of Bug and Guts interactions, and I like their little relationship building, or I guess their lack of, because again, Bugs is super excited, wants to get to know Guts, look out for him. Guts doesn't want any of this. I would say that if Bug wasn't able to just go ahead and heal Guts, there's probably not a lot of use for Guts to have Bug around. So Guts ends up running into a guy named Vargas. We find out that Vargas has this thing called the Behelit. I might be pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. But the Behelit, I think it's Behelit. It's like this little like medallion of like faces and nose and ears. It's really creepy stuff. But again, I'm thinking, okay, this is an important medallion or whatever it might be. I don't know what it is yet at this point in the story. And I'm wondering if that has something to do with the God Hand, because as soon as Guts sees it, he's like, oh, and he ends up actually taking it from Vargas. And Vargas is a very sympathetic character. I didn't know what he was up to at first, didn't know if we could trust him, but then you find out that the Count had held him prisoner and tortured him and killed his family, and it's like really rough stuff. And then eventually, the Count actually captures him, puts him up for execution. Xandar gets possessed by the Count, I believe it was, comes in, they have this epic fight, and I thought that fight was actually pretty awesome. I thought it was better than the Snake Lord fight, to be honest. And I was wondering like if that would be kind of the end of the Black Swordsman arc, because at the time I didn't know like when it was going to end, when Golden Age was going to pick up. So it was cool to see that continue. But Vargas gets captured, right? And then he's going up for execution, and basically Bug's freaking out. She's like, we can't let this happen. You have to save him. And then we get this like interesting scene where Guts, this guy who, I mean, for all intents and purposes, seems like a sociopath. He seems like he does want to save him, but he also knows that it's like a futile attempt, right? And that it's kind of bait for him to come and get captured. And at the end of the day, Vargas gets executed. And I thought that this was a moment where I said, okay, I'm invested, and I'm going to keep reading this probably no matter what happens at the end of this arc. Because to me, Vargas got put in a very bad situation and didn't get out. That's so important for me to enjoy something, to feel like the stakes are really, really high. Too many times, authors or storytellers or whatever put people in situations where they shouldn't get out, and they do. And then you go, well, whatever, and you write it off. But whenever the consequences are paid, now you got my attention. And it was at that moment when Vargas actually went down, and like Bugs was super upset. And I think Guts might have even been slightly upset. He was clearly having an internal struggle. I said, there's a little bit more than meets the eye with this story, but also with Guts, and I was all in. So Guts ends up saying, I'll do what Vargas couldn't, and I'll go in there and I'll finish this job. And this is him getting back to his really, kind of straight-faced way, like he doesn't care about anything. So he goes, he fights, he beats Zondark or Zandark, and he ends up getting to the Count. And they have this big battle. And it's also the first time, I think, where you see that, like, Guts, there's, like, other powerful people in this world. I mean, the Count's very powerful. He turns into, like, this big slug-looking thing, which is perfect for how he was depicted in the pictures. It just made a lot of sense for him to turn into a gigantic slug, to be honest, as weird as that sounds. And they have this really epic fight. And it looks like Guts is going to be on the downside of things, but he ends up taking, well, definitely Bug also helps out here quite a bit. And if it wasn't for her, I think Guts was a goner, which is cool. I don't know if we'll ever see Guts admit that, who knows. But he takes the Count's daughter, Teresia, who Bug had befriended, because the Count actually took mercy on Bug and said, here's my daughter who never leaves the house. She's kind of like trapped up, she's like Rapunzel, she's trapped up in a tower type deal, right? So she comes down, Bug is there, and his Guts takes her hostage essentially, and then he's able to use his launcher arm or whatever, his like robotic arm. Is it a launcher arm? Somebody tell me in the comments. I'm new. Don't take my head. But he ends up getting the upper hand, shooting it down, and then the Count in his last moments, he has the God, not the God hand. They get there eventually, but he takes the Behelit and he calls on the God hand. So the Count summons the God hand, right? And they're like in this new like dimension. It's very interesting. I have no idea what was going on, but I'm like, okay, like the scope of this story did just. I was expecting maybe like volume 3, like book 3 or something. It would get a little crazy, but no, just explodes. We get the God hand. Guts immediately recognizes someone named Griffith, and he is pissed. And there's like this big back and forth, and they're talking about other people coming, and they seem extraordinarily powerful. Like I'm thinking Guts is in big trouble here, and essentially they tell the Count that he must sacrifice his daughter. And this is where the Count gets, again, kind of gray, right? Obviously a really evil and nasty guy, but you find out that wasn't always the case. Some pretty awful stuff happened with his wife. He found her, basically being unfaithful, but also part of like the satanic cult type thing, just berserk. Here's one thing I respect so much about this story. It doesn't wait to issue 12 to get weird. It got weird from panel 1 and continued to be weird and absurd and graphic all the way through. Like, it is very much, hey, this is what this is going to be like, and you either like it or you don't. I happen to really like it, even though it is really graphic and it is really grim. It's up my alley and it clicks with my taste. Some of the stuff's pretty wild, but I think there's good storytelling underneath. And the Count gets fleshed out and has a lot more nuance, and that makes him more of an intriguing character to me. Even at the end, where he basically chooses not to sacrifice his daughter. And then you think about our protagonist, right? You have Guts. I don't know if Guts would have made that. I think he would sacrifice Bug right now, if he could, who seems to be his only friend in the world. So that makes the Count a much more interesting antagonist, doesn't it? And again, all these things are happening, and I'm clicking my head on like, I gotta go get Deluxe number 2 immediately. And I did, by the way. But whenever the Count's being pulled in, kind of like to this internal damnation, he's kind of being captured for what seems eternity. You see Vargas, the man he executed just a couple panels, back, pulling him down. I thought that was nice, like, good way to wrap that up, nice and neat. It's simple storytelling here in Black Swordsman Arc, but it's really good. And there's a lot of people who don't get all the basics right, but I think that this arc did. So then we get thrown out, like, it seems like, again, that Guts is in a lot of trouble, but he ends up getting out. He gets teleported back by the skin of his teeth, and we run back into the Count's daughter. Teresia basically swears that she no longer wants to die, that she wants to live so she can see Guts die. And now I'm wondering, are we going to see Teresia, because, her father was a very powerful person, he was in charge, are we going to see her now, later down the road, being a roadblock or being an enemy of Guts? And also, Bug and her like a little friendship they had, I thought it was like really nice, and now I feel like that's tainted, and it's kind of sad. But the exclamation point on Berserk Deluxe Edition 1 is the fact that at the end, this sociopathic type guy, I think, Guts, kind of exposes himself to not just be that. He's just seen this figure from his past or something, or someone that means something to him with Griffith, and all these things have happened. The Count's dead. This girl that he saved her life from falling off the edge. Basically, she tries to throw herself off the edge. He catches her, right? Wishes death upon him. Says she just wants to see him die. And to him, I feel like he thinks the whole world wouldn't mind if he was gone. But this strained, weird friendship with Bug at the end. Bug sees just a hint of remorse and emotion and guts. And it's like a panel, but it's subtle enough to think. Bug probably thinks, well, maybe I should stick with this guy. There's something about him. There's something about him. I think Bug's just a good elf or a person or whatever. And that is the exclamation point for me on this arc, is the fact that Guts is not just a dude with a big sword slaying monsters, one-lining macho man. There's a lot more going on, and I think that we're going to get a peek into his past with the Golden Age arc based on what I read at the end of Deluxe 1. I'll be making a Golden Age arc as review as well, or discussion or something, so be on the lookout for that. But just what I had here, I could tell that this is the foundations of a much deeper story with a bigger scope hidden behind it, and really interesting questions about morality and ethics, which I am always down for. I love those conversations. I like to ponder those thoughts, and I'm in. I'm all in on Berserk, guys. I really, really enjoyed this. I'm sure there's some of you watching my channel for the first time. If you want to see me continue to go through Berserk and my reactions, and as I get more familiar with the medium and I get more familiar with story and exactly what is being brought to me and put to my attention here within Berserk, I think I'm going to have even more things to say. Hit subscribe if you want to see that. And I also will be covering the Vinland Saga, which is another manga I'm really, really enjoying so far. I'm actually a lot further along in that, and I'm going to be having some discussions about Vinland Saga. So if you want to see all that, again, hit subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, hit like. If you loved it, I do have a Patreon down in the description, optional, but always appreciated. And yeah, I'm excited. Not just to get into manga, but specifically to get more into Berserk, because the people who recommended to me this were completely correct. And I mean, come on, he has like a launcher arm and a huge sword and an elf flying around him. It's kind of fascinating. And I think that Berserk, all the fantasy books I read, I feel like a lot of stuff actually might have taken some inspiration here. Getting a lot of Kaladin. I mean, he's obviously not as gruesome as Guts, but, a big sword, kind of like a shard blade and a little, fairy following him around, kind of like a spread in Stormlight Archive. And there's a million other things I'm sure I'll find that Berserk has inspired, because it is a kind of a monumental piece in not just manga, but the fantasy genre and storytelling. So I'm excited to get started. I hope that this wasn't too rambly. I don't want to just recap events, but I just want to give my reaction to things that I saw and talk about the story. And it was a really good time. And I appreciate you spending your time with me today talking, or at least listening to me talk about Berserk Deluxe Volume 1. And up next will be the Golden Age arc, and I'm excited to get to it. So until I see you then, I hope you're good. I hope you're safe. And remember to always keep turning the page.